everyone. Welcome to another night in our Family Life Seminar as we celebrate Christian Home and Marriage Week here at the Pen Seventh-day Adventist Church. Tonight's topic, it's hard to say goodbye. Understanding grief and bereavement. Learning about grief can help us understand what we are going through. So, brothers and sisters here in physical church and those who are online, I implore you to seek to apply and impart the information as we gain added knowledge. At this
Good night, everyone. Please stand for prayer. Let us pray. Dear Lord in heaven, we thank you for another night. We thank you for taking us here safely, oh God. And as we're going into this series, knowledge and understanding from what we will be learning, dear Father, and we may live it out in our everyday life. Hear and answer our prayer. Hasten the footsteps of those who are coming. Help that they may reach safely, O God, to hear from thy throne, O Father. Hear and answer our prayer. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Our opening hymn is Burdens Are Lifted at Calvary. Number 476. Just begin. Days are filled with sorrow and care, hearts are lonely and dry. Burdens are lifted at Calvary, Calvary, Calvary. Burdens are lifted at Calvary. Jesus is very near. Cast your care on Jesus today. Leave your worry and fear. Burdens are lifted at Calvary. Calvary's very near. Burdens are lifted at Calvary. Calvary, Calvary. Burdens are lifted at Calvary. Jesus is very near. Troubled soul, the Savior can see. Every heartache and tear. Jesus is very near. Burdens are lifted at Calvary. Calvary, Calvary. Burdens are lifted
Revelations 24. Revelation 21, verse 4. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away.
Amen. Here ends a portion of God's holy words.
Has been with us since Sabbath of last week. She is Dr. Janet Kane Walters, and she currently serves as the director of the Counseling and Psychological Services Center at the Northern Caribbean University. She also has her private practice in Mandeville with face-to-face and online sessions. Dr. Walters is a licensed counseling psychologist, a family therapist, certified clinical trauma professional, certified advanced grief counseling specialist, and trained in disaster mental health counseling. She earned a PhD in counseling psychology, emphasis in marriage and family therapy from the Northern Caribbean University. Brothers and sisters, I invite you to sit back and listen to all the information my colleague, Dr. Kane Walters, has to offer. At this time, I hand over to Dr. Walters. Comfort bring you, take it then where'er you go. Take the name of Jesus with you, child of sorrow and of woe. It will joy and comfort give you. Take it then where'er you go. Precious name, oh how sweet, hope of earth and joy of heaven. Precious name, oh how sweet, hope of earth and joy of heaven. Take the name of Jesus ever as a shield. Breathe that holy name in prayer. Precious name, oh how sweet, hope of earth and joy of heaven. Fills our souls with joy when his loving arms receive us, and his songs our tongues employ. Precious name, oh how sweet, hope of earth and joy of heaven. Hallelujah, precious name. of Jesus bowing, falling prostrate at his feet. Of kings in heaven will crown him when our journey is complete. Of heaven. This song is very comforting and very fitting. I invite you all to sit. Form of grief. So I invite now our presenter who will share with us more on the topic of grief.
Good night, everyone. It's good to be here tonight. I'm having a wonderful time. How about you? Wonderful. I know from the appetite for it. We don't like to talk about it. We prefer if it is not said. And so we have to talk about it. Once there is life, there is death. And so it is hard to say goodbye. So I want to talk about understanding grief and bereavement. And so when we're talking about grief, what we're saying, it is a natural response to loss. It's an emotional suffering you feel when something or someone you love is taken. So grief doesn't necessarily mean that you would have lost a person, but it could be a thing. It could be a nice dress, but it's short term. You cry, I've missed the dress, short term. All right? But grief is a process, not a state. When you say a process, it means that you're going through different stages. And so bereaved people tend to move through the different stages. It varies in nature and severity between people. People grieve differently. I grieve different from the other person. And so the fact that has led to the classification of quite a few different types of grief. There are two major ways in which grief has been classified: normal or uncomplicated, and complicated and or prolonged grief. And so when we're talking about complicated or prolonged grief, that can occur with major depression, life-threatening mental health issues, and for some persons, thinking about or attempting suicide. So let me share with you different types of grief. And as a therapist, as a grief counselor, I need to know what type of grief my client is experiencing. I need to know. The first one I have is normal grief. Yes, it is, as it says, it is normal. So we're going to cry, we're going to be sad, we're going to miss the person. And so it's a normal thing for us to grieve. The next one is anticipatory grief. This is when you start grieving the loss of someone who is still alive, but the person might have an illness, a terminal illness, and so you're anticipating when, you don't know when, and you start grieving the loss of that person. And that one can go on for years because you're not too sure when this person would die. Then there's a complicated grief now, when you do not move all the way through the steps of grief, you're somewhere there, you're stuck, maybe at anger, and you refuse to move. Then there's a chronic grief, and this is where extreme intense reaction to the loss do not subside, and the emotions last a little longer time, and it causes you to have distress, and it continues over time to intensify. Another one we have is delayed grief. This is when, as it says, delayed. You did not go through the process. The grief was just stopped at a point, and that's it. And so it can be for a number of years. Persons have not decided, I don't want to grieve. That's it. Forget about it. And so a lot of times these delayed grief cause other complications, because the person will be suffering like maybe depression or still in a state of, they can be in a state of shock and it's prolonging. They can be in denial. Another one is distorted grief. And this is where it's very intense or extreme reaction to the loss. And so you notice this in the person's behavior. And so they'll be very destructive. They could be destroying property. They can be destroying his or herself. And this is usually common. Another one is the cumulative grief. And this is where you experience a second grief shortly after the grief that you're going through. And so it is so difficult for someone to grieve. Which one do you grieve first? Do you stop the first one, go to the second, or the second, and you're in that confused state? Then there's the exaggerated grief. And this is where more intense type of reaction, and you see it in other types of grief, and this is where the emotions and actions are exaggerated, and they become noticeable and disruptive. So if the person is crying, it's cry. It's tearfulness so often, getting very angry just about every day. Secondary loss now is the grief that occurs when a loss affects several areas of your life. So let's say, for argument's sake, you lost this person. As a result of this loss, it might be a job that was connected to this person. So you would have lost that job and other things that will come because of that one primary loss. Then there is one we call the mask grief. And this is where the physical symptoms are present, or the behavior tend to impair normal functioning. And so it's almost like the person's pretending not to grieve. So they're trying to mask it, you know? As it says, masking, making sure that nobody knows what is happening. Now, this one is a hush-hush one. This enfranchised grief is an ambiguous grief. But let me give you an example of this one now. So this is where the loss isn't validated by others. For example, someone, let's say I'm married. Well, I'm married. I'm a married person, and I have an affair with this guy, and who is maybe married too, right? He dies. Nobody knows we're in a relationship. Nobody can know that I'm grieving, and so it becomes a bit ambiguous, because it is against the norm. It's against the culture. And so sometimes persons will grieve. They can't grieve outwardly, like the rest of us, they have to hide that little part of it. All right? Traumatic grief, and this is common as a result of a traumatic experience, and so the person would have died as a result of an accident or any traumatic event or violence or whatever, an accident or something like that. Another one we have is collective grief, and this happens when a tragedy affects the community. So if somebody, a very famous person or a community person dies in the community, it's a collective grief because all of us grieving the loss of this particular person. Or it could be an attack on the community, or it could be a national tragedy. So it's a collective grief. So we all are grieving. Then there's the inhibited grief, and this means showing no obvious outward form of grief. And so it happens over a long period, and the person is not able to move through the stages effectively, and so the likelihood of this person having some physical reactions because the person has not dealt with the emotions. So the person could be suffering from weight loss or weight gain, things like that, because the person might not be eating or overeating, and so it comes in that direction. Abbreviated grief, this is, as it says, abbreviated short, and this is when the person passes away and is replaced in a short time by someone or something. All right? And usually this happens when the relationship is not, it might not be a close relationship, or the relationship was not as attached, and so it's okay. The person might get married, okay, there was a problem with the wife before, whatever it is. And there's an absent grief now, where it means not showing any of the typical signs of grief, acting as though you haven't experience a loss at all, and it can happen due to complete shock or total denial. So sometimes we say, but this person is not reacting as normal as that person should be, and that is what we call absent grief. No, so I've given you the different types of grief, and I'm sure you can identify some of them, even among persons that you know, even among yourself. So what is bereavement? So while grief is, and bereavement, they go hand in hand, but bereavement is a period, that is a time frame of grief and mourning after death. So it's the bereavement period, and it refers to the state of having experienced a loss of a loved one. And so when we talk about bereavement and grief, we also hear the term mourning. So as a grief and mourning. So we're talking about mourning, we're talking about the process that occurs after a loss. And this is where during this time the person grieve or formally expresses their grief. And how do we express our grief? We wear black, or we put up a black flag on the pole or something. Is an expression that I'm currently mourning the loss of someone. And so who grieves? Some of us? Everybody. We all grieve. And so everyone grieves differently. So the grieving process takes time, and so it cannot be hurried. And so you say, but sister, you're taking so long. It's a year, it's 6 months, move on. It is not as easy as to say move on. Healing happens gradually, and it cannot be forced or hurried, and there's no normal timetable for grieving. However, there are situations where it can become complicated, where the person is not functioning normally, or the person is not dealing with the everyday activities. Be patient and allow the process to naturally unfold. Then we hear some myths. Myth number one I have: the pain will go away faster if you ignore it. Didn't we talk about one of the types of grief? The fact is, trying to ignore your pain or keeping it from surfacing will only make it worse in the long run. For real healing, it is necessary to face your grief and actively deal with it. And men, it is okay to cry if you want to cry. Myth number 2, it is important to be strong in the face of loss. So I have to be strong. Who says I have to be strong? So feeling sad, frightened, or lonely is normal. It's a normal reaction to loss. Crying doesn't mean that you're weak, you know. You don't have to cry. Persons express their loss differently. Some persons say, but he's not crying or she's not crying. Doesn't mean that the person is not grieving. You don't need to protect your family or friend by putting on a brave front. Showing your true feeling can help them and you. Here's another myth. If you don't cry, it means you aren't sorry about the loss. Crying is a normal response, but it's not for everyone. And so those who don't cry may feel the pain just as deeply as the other person. All right? But they have another way of dealing with it. Some people cry in the pillow. You're going to say the person didn't cry? The person don't need to give you evidence that they cried in the pillow. Another myth I have, grief should last about a year. Who said so? Who said it? That there is no right or wrong time frame for grieving. How long it takes can differ from person to person. And it doesn't mean that you didn't love the person because your grieving period would have been shorter than whatever most of us would say. It doesn't mean you didn't love the person, but you need to move on. And Elizabeth Gobler-Ross, she stated the 5 stages of grief. And I know they have included 1 or 2 more in, but I'll settle with Ross, 5 stages. And she says, denial. The first stage is denial. It can't be happening to me. I can't believe it. No. This is not so. I saw him last night. I spoke with him. No. And so we're denying. Anger. Why is this happening? Who is to be blamed? Blame the hospital, blame the driver, whomever. Bargaining. Make this not happen, and in return I will. Lord, you have raised Lazarus from the dead. Can't you raise my loss from the dead? You're bargaining. What if I have? You think I should? Are you bargaining? And so you get into the depressed stage now. I'm too sad to do anything. Having gone through the anger and the denial and all that energy, now you're feeling sad. I am too sad to do anything. And for some persons, they get stuck in that stage. Just giving up right there. And there's the acceptance stage. It is at this point, I'm at peace with what had happened. I'm totally at peace, but I'm taking it gradually. And so what are the symptoms of grief? Shock and disbelief. So right after a loss, it can be hard to accept what happened. You heard the news. Think about your loss. Think about how you felt the first time you heard somebody said, did so-and-so died in an accident, or so-and-so. And you're like, no, but that's a shock and disbelief. And so gradually, so you may feel numb at this point. You have trouble believing that it really has happened. You become aware of what is happening. Some people prolong the stage of shock because they are unable to express that emotion immediately. Some persons faint. Some persons die at that point, the shock of it. And so gradually, we become aware of what is happening. The next one is anger. Feeling angry and resentful. Some persons are angry with the person who died. How can you die and leave me like this? I'm upset with you. I'm so angry, right? So if you lost a loved one, you may be angry at yourself. Some persons are angry with God.
Is it okay to be angry with God? God understands. Because after a while, you're going to come to him and say, Lord, this is what it is. Sometimes we are angry with the doctors at the hospital. They should have done something quicker. Why didn't they do it? And we are angry. And so the next one that comes is sadness. Crying a lot or feeling emotionally unstable. It's as if the tears, you can't hold back the tears. The tears just keep coming and coming and coming. But profound sadness is probably the most universal experience, symptoms of grief. And you may have the feeling of emptiness and despair, and you yearn for this person, and you cry a lot because you're emotionally unstable. And so what are some of the symptoms? Some persons have guilt. They regret saying they should have said something to the person. The person left the home, and you might say to the person, you didn't take out the garbage this morning, just to hear later on the person died. And all you can remember, the last thing I said to him was, you should have taken out the garbage, versus, oh, I love you, honey, I'll see you later. Certain feelings, did I contribute anything to what had happened? Not doing something to prevent the death. Some persons believe that if they had done X, I should have taken her to work. Maybe if I had driven the car, nothing would have happened. And so you feel that sense of regret, and so some persons really feel guilty, and perhaps they want to do something that will help them not to feel so guilty. But then there's the fear, the anxiety, the helplessness, the insecurity. What do I do now? What it is that needs to happen. The death of a loved one can figure fear about your own mortality, or facing life without that person, or the responsibility you now face alone. What about a couple who has lost a family, a spouse that's a single parent home now? How am I going to deal with this? Then, the emotional release. Suppressed feelings often surface at a later time in unhealthy way. So you have to share feelings because that's a gift, and bring a closeness to all involved. At some point, persons begin to feel and hurt. And so it is important that we don't suppress these feelings. Some persons get preoccupied with the deceased or the crisis. They can't move on. I see him every day. I see him in the bedroom. I see him in the living room. And so despite effort to think of other things, a grieving person may find it difficult to shift his or her mind from thoughts about the deceased person. Now, when you're at a point where you cannot manage, then you have to seek professional help. And this is not unusual, and with time should not be a problem. Another symptoms of complicated grief. Now, this is where it is getting worse. I can call it that. Intense longing and yearning for the deceased. Intrusive thoughts of images of the loved one, as I said earlier on, about seeing the person wherever he or she you think that person is. Imagining that you and the loved one is alive. So you're saying, he's sitting right here, leave the space for him, he's right here. No, you can't go there. I'm preparing the food for him. He's going to come, he's going to have dinner with us. That's when it becomes complicated. Searching for the person in familiar places. He's normally around his desk, doing some work, and I going around there to see if he's there. Avoiding things that remind you of your loved one. You don't want to see the clothes, you don't want to say anything. Extreme bitterness or anger over the loss. Why did he do that to me? Did he know that he should not have left me now? Feeling that life is empty or meaningless. And so when persons' life become empty and meaningless, it's at this point where some persons say, life is not worth living. I want to join the person. The physical and emotional distress, fatigue, very tired, nausea, immunity, the weight loss, gain weight, sleeplessness, tiredness, tightness in the throat, choking feeling, shortness of breath, because you're so welled up with grief. Some persons, the deep sighing, the hollow feeling in the stomach, lack of muscular power, it's almost impossible to climb a stairs, digestive symptoms, and poor appetite. What do you do at this point? How do you cope with grief? Get support. Turn to a friend and family members. Draw comfort from your faith. Join a support group, right? Talk to a therapist or grief counselor. Take care of yourself. If you're grieving, it's important to take care of yourself. Interestingly, though, we have a culture where when persons are grieving, we're expecting them to take care of us who are not grieving. And so we go to the house and we're expecting them to entertain us. We are supposed to be helping them to make sure that they take care of themselves. Yes? Face your feelings. Face them. Express your feeling in a tangible way. So take over something that they can eat. They might not be able to cook or something. Take something along. Don't let anyone tell you how to feel, and don't tell yourself how to feel either. Plan ahead for grief triggers. So when I talk about grief trigger, persons who are grieving, or you would have picked up on this one, is the triggers like anniversary. What are you going to do on the anniversary date of the death of this person? Is it going to be a sad time? Are you going to get so depressed? You have to plan ahead as to what you plan to do on that particular day. So contact a grief counselor or professional therapist if you feel like life isn't worth living. You wish you had died with your loved ones. Blaming yourself for the loss or for failing to prevent it. It sounds weird when we say that, but that's how you feel. Some persons feel when they're grieving. Some persons feel numb and disconnected from others for more than a few weeks. This is a good time to seek professional help. If you're having difficulty trusting others since your loss, that's a good time as well. Or you're unable to perform your normal daily activities, such as not having a bath, not eating, not going out, nothing like that. You know, this is something that has always been, it weighed heavily on my mind. When we see people grieving and we don't know what to say. And some person will come and say, what do I say to this person? What's the best way to express your condolences over the loss of a loved one? So you know of persons who have lost a loved one. What do you say? Do you know what to say? Should you say something? All right. So let us work through what we can say. Expressing your condolences such as, don't be afraid to send a sympathy note. If you can't say anything, go and buy a sympathy card. If you're at a loss, be honest, right? I don't know what to say, but I want you to know I'm thinking of you. Use the deceased name. Don't say, what's his name? Call the name. Never tell people to look on the bright side. Which side is the bright side? How can you tell me that when I've lost my loved one, that I'm to look at the bright side? Avoid using words like dead or died. A better phrase is your loss, because that's what the recipient is struggling with. The recipient is struggling with a loss. Keep your sympathies short and sweet. Words seem inadequate to express the sadness we feel about Mary. May the love of those around you help you through the days ahead. We are deeply sorry to hear about the death of John. We have brought you so many gifts. John has brought you so many gifts in our lives. We will never forget him. Words cannot even begin to express our sorrow. You are in our prayers. I'm coming up to a very popular one that we always use. We're saddened to hear your loss. Our hearts are with you in the time of sorrow. Please accept our heartfelt condolences on the loss of your loved one. Words can't express how saddened we are to hear of your loss. I can't imagine the sadness you must be feeling from your loss. Words fall short of expressing my sorrow for your loss. But guess what? For some of us, we don't know. Some of persons are insensitive. Avoid comparing the loss of something, the loss to something you have experienced. If I lost my brother and you lost your brother, it's two different things we're talking about. I'm experiencing something different. So because everyone grieves differently, don't ever say, I know how you feel. You don't know how I feel. Or I feel the same way when. It's not effective either, because chances are you don't know how they feel and they'll probably never felt the same way. So never you say that I understand. You don't understand. I hear the sadness. I can sense that you are, but you don't understand. Avoid canned statement and cliches. She's in a better place. Where is a better place? Is 6 foot under a better place? God doesn't give you more than you can handle. We hear that at funerals so many times. At least you have other children. Parents just lost a child. At least you have other children. How insensitive. The Lord give it and the Lord take it away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. That one is so popular. You know the text that says about throwing pearl before swine? You know that text? The person cannot appreciate the words that you're saying at that point. They cannot fathom what you're saying. God needed another angel. Was God short of angel? That's why he took away my child? Did he need another angel? What happened? You can always have more children. How insensitive. It's for the best. Best for whom? Warning. If they get mad or start crying, remain calm. If you're someone who is not able to control yourself, or you're not able to manage being around someone who's grieving, please don't go. But if the person starts crying or they're getting mad or whatever, just remain calm. Don't say, sister, you're not supposed to behave this way. Remain calm. Let them just explode let them express the emotions. If someone goes totally crazy, when we say crazy, we're just, not crazy, but they're really angry and does something dangerous like throwing the furniture and so forth, wait for the person to calm down. And before I forget, if you're the person who is going to tell someone of a loss, somebody died, please make sure that it is done in an appropriate way. If you're going to speak to someone on the phone, please make sure somebody's there, the person is seated, because you don't know the response, how the person would respond to the loss. The person might be in such a shock, might tilt over, hit on something you don't know. So you need to make sure to find out where the person is, with somebody else around the place. Don't get carried away. Don't start with the whole thing and sometimes you start talking about yourself and you forget where you are. Don't get carried away with all these things. And so, I want to remind you that grief is not a disorder, a disease or sign of weakness. It is an emotional, physical, and spiritual necessity. The price you pay for love, the only cure for grief is to grieve. And this is the time now for your questions and comments and concerns. The floor is now open. Did I finish too quickly? Right on time. Yes. Wow. You're savoring what I just said. Because a lot of times we take it for granted that we're to just talk. Let's be sensitive. When you go to visit someone who is grieving, it is best just to sit and don't say anything. Don't say anything. Just sit. If they say, just be quiet. let them talk. If you cannot deal with it, let somebody else deal with it. Sister Francis can tell you, when we're in therapy, we listen to the client over and over, repeat the same thing. But we are trained to listen. We listen. And sometimes they go and they say, but you know that we're listening the same way. So just listen, just sit down. Don't say anything, because you're going to say something that is going to disrupt the whole, whatever is happening there. And please do not use those texts. Just, if you have never done that, put your finger at your mouth and don't say anything. Yes, Ella, go ahead.
Good night, everyone. Nothing is wrong with being quiet. Sometimes an individual wants company, not a voice. And I've learned that over the years.
For the first 3 days.
No, and I'm not calling you back. I just allowed that time to just for the family to contend with the situation. And then when I call, I'm never going to ask them how you do. It's a bad question to ask.
Oh, Ed, let me just add to what you say. You say, I'm old enough, so I'm going to forget. Don't go and ask what happened. How did that?
The person died.
Yes.
Don't do it.
Yes.
And I like what you said. A lot of times we rush into and we don't allow the person to realize what is happening. You're calling, Ella Waters, what happened? And I'm like, I'm trying to process the shock and disbelief at this moment. I cannot speak with you.
Yes. So I am suggesting that that's an approach that you can take. And trust me, it works. Because after the whole anger and the whole range of emotions that you go through has been suppressed a little, the person is able to reason with you.
Yes.
You understand? And will the question that you want to ask, the person will just tell you. Just tell you, they just pour it out. And as you said, for God's sakes, don't use these
Cliches.
They don't work.
They don't work.
And when you pray not for the person who has died. I hear it all the time. Pray for the persons in front of you who needs the support and the comfort at such a time as this.
But the thing is, Elder, we go to the funeral and we do all of these things. But once the funeral is over, we're done with the person, the persons who are living.
Mercy.
We don't visit, we don't call. And this is the time that the family would need the support, when everything is over. And this is thus says me, didn't find it anywhere. Be mindful of the persons who are actually, the family members who are grieving at the church. When you have this long, all day hours, the program, it is just, remember that the family members are grieving. They need time to grieve. So when you have the program, you're trying to get in everything and everybody wants to talk. Be mindful of the persons who are grieving. I think we're very insensitive to them. It's not about you, it's about them.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So be mindful. They need your help right after.
Yes, Doc. Can you speak to what can happen to a person if they don't go through the stages of grieving or grieving? because a couple of years ago, I had a former student whose father had died. I think he died when the youngster was in grade 6, but he never grieved the death of his father. And when he was in 5th form, it's like he just shut down and nobody could understand. So if you could expound on what really takes place if we don't go through the process of grieving.
Okay, so it becomes complicated, all right? So as I mentioned earlier on, so it's going to affect you physically and emotionally, because all that built up emotions need to come out. So once it is not coming out, it's going to manifest itself. So what happens is that he just break. And so, yeah, the shutdown is just part of the whole emotional thing that he has gone through. And the more you push him to ask him what happened, he doesn't know. Until he would have seek professional help, then we will know that that is the cause of, because we go back to see what would have happened. And so emotions, God made us with emotions, we need to express them, but in an appropriate way. So yes, so that is a breaking point. So if it's not expressed and it goes on for years, it's going to come out at some point. The physical, the emotional, and so forth.
Yes, I'd like to ask a question.
Oh, sorry, she was there. No, I think she was there first. Go ahead, sister.
I know you said that there are different stages of grief. And can anything be done about a person who refuses to let go, gets stuck in one stage and refuses to let go?
What do? You can't do anything of yourself. That is professional help. That's what I'm saying, guys. Sometimes we say we can help, but it comes a point when it becomes complicated, and this is where the professionals would come in. Because we know how to help the persons out of it, well, go through, because we have to take them back to the stages, take them back to the funeral, what happened, so, before, after, during, and we know how to do it without re-traumatizing the person. So I'm saying if you're trying to do that, you can cause more harm than good. All right? So the person definitely will need help, because if it doesn't come out at that point, later on down, as my brother, later on down it's going to affect other relationships. And it can become a trigger. So if something familiar happens, it's going to cause person to go back to that point. So it can become a trigger as well.
Check 1, 2. Yes, Doc. I belong to a family that war over deadlift. And how do you explain this type of emotion that they are warring over what is they are going to inherit even before they go through the grieving process?
What is the question? I'm not even sure how to answer it. And the thing about it is that the persons, not everybody, and I said it earlier on, not everybody will have the same attachment to the loss. You know, each person will have their different attachment to the loss. So perhaps those persons who are fighting might not really there for the loss. They're not, it is just short term for them. So they might be going through that. But it is a sad situation. Mm-hmm. It is a sad situation. And I'm just saying to us, those of you who are listening, please make sure that whatever legacy or whatever it is that you're leaving, that it is done properly. so that people don't, start fighting over it. And can you imagine the families is grieving and people are fighting and people are taking out stuff even before? It makes the grieving process so, what's the word, Ella? Long, it strenuous, it overbearing, all the alleys you can think about. Yes? And so we have to be very mindful of these things.
Can somebody be grieving before a death?
It is called anticipatory grief.
Okay. And in cases where persons are in situation where they are constantly exposed to people who are dying, how do you handle such a situation?
Okay, it is called vicarious trauma. You are traumatized secondhand trauma. So we call it vicarious trauma. Yeah, doctors and nurses do happen. We as psychologists, it happened to us. So we have to seek help to help us to go through, because we are human beings and we do experience these things. And so when you reach that point, you have to take a break from it and get some help. Because I've had experience where, I really, tears came to my eyes. I had to just quickly go to the bathroom and, get my act together. And I called one of my colleagues and I said, boy, I really felt this and I had to talk it out. So I have to go through the talk out process as well so I can get through it. Yes? So it is natural, but it is for you now to find a way to deal with it. If you don't, it's going to affect you as if you are the one who would have had a loss. So you have to deal with it in a professional manner as well. So your colleague or whomever it is that you would go to. So you have to take a break. Yes, sir.
The question I have is a hypothetical one. It perhaps could relate to, be compared to a person who's an alcoholic and does not readily acknowledge that he or she has a problem. So that's the direction of the question. In terms of someone who needs professional help, and let's say I myself or others don't, is of the opinion that the person is at the place where they are not recognizing that they are in need of professional help. What are some of the strategies or the ways that you would suggest to get that one to be approached?
The reality is you cannot force someone to get help. You can encourage and suggest. But if the person is not willing to do it, you can't force them. It's as simple as that. You can make the suggestion. Don't tell them, I'm suggesting, what if? Make suggestions. And you'd never give advice. You make suggestions.
It's a strange ask, but I'm asking. Is it a normal thing to be angry with somebody who has died?
Yes, I did say it.
No, I wasn't here.
Oh, okay. It is natural.
What explains that, though?
The shock of it, the whole shock and denial and everything, because you're angry with the person because the person, let's say it's your partner, and you're angry with the person for dying. You're not thinking, I want to say you're not thinking logically, because you're not in that frame of mind. But yes, you can be angry with the person for dying, for leaving you, or you can be angry because the person leave you in debt. And so you are angry with the person. Yes, you can. And some persons, as I said earlier, you can be angry with God for taking away the person. You might have been praying for long hours and you say, Lord, whatever your prayer, and the Lord take away this person. You say, but Lord, I won't speak with you. I'm so angry with you. But after a while, when you come around, you realize, that you don't need to be angry with God. You don't need to be angry with the person, so forth, because you've already now seen why this has happened.
How long you think such a condition of the mind should last? How long should this anger last? What is normal?
Okay, there is no, if your anger is becoming very destructive, meaning that you're going around and you're breaking up stuff and you going to fight with others, then it is out of control. So when it is out of control, we cannot put a time limit as to say you need to grieve for a year or 2 years, couple months. It's up to you as an individual. But when it starts to affect your normal functioning now, when it starts to affect your daily routine, your interaction with others, family members, and so forth, this is where, you need some help.
Okay, I've lost my mother, and I don't know, all that you spoke about since night, I find that I'm going through almost all of them. Even though I'm speaking to you.
You're welled up.
Yes, and I find that I love to be by myself. Well, even before, but since she passed, I tend to want to be more reserved.
Is it reserve or isolate? Isolate yourself?
Yeah. And the less I can speak, I feel comfortable. Sometimes, yes, I will cry. My husband will come and he will ask me what happened. I will tell him. But to me, I feel that he don't understand and he don't know what I'm going through. Yes, he don't know what I'm going through, but I don't know. I just want somebody to understand what I'm going through, feel what I'm feeling, but I just want to be by myself. And sometimes I will be there and some things might just happen, or, and my heart just skip a beat, and, and I don't know, sometimes, all right, my mother got hit, she got lit down, and because of that traumatized me sometimes. Reason being, like if I'm on the road and I see like any dog dead on the road, the voice said to me, I saw your mother dead. And yes, and it happened a couple Sabbaths when I was coming to church one morning, and for the whole time I was so, I don't know. And I said, God, why she really have to dead like a dog? And it's like, I don't know, but I don't know. I'm just going through. It is 3 years now, and it doesn't seem like it's 3 years. So I don't know.
You see, what is happening is that once you isolate yourself is also a form of avoidance, because you're avoiding, and you're avoiding whatever's happened. Yes, the trauma is there, the vicarious trauma, but the thing about it is that, yes, your husband can't understand. He'll never. And he's just asking how you're doing because he wants to comfort you, but he doesn't know how to do it, because you can't explain, he can't understand. And so this is where we come in as professionals.
Sometimes I want to scream.
Yes.
And just scream, and I don't want nobody to stop me.
Right. And the thing is, depending on how the time when she died and all the process, if you didn't get a chance to grieve, it's got to be there. You want to, but you can't. Some persons are not allowed to grieve because they're supposed to be strong and do everything, and we have to allow people to grieve. So you need that time to grieve. And I think the number will go back up on the screen. 5330810. All right? And there are other professionals around, so you need to go. Yeah, is that a question there? Okay. Okay, there are no other questions. Hello, Oti, I think that is it. I'm not seeing, oh, there's one more question. Okay, go ahead.
Not a question, but an observation.
Yes, sir.
An observation that well, not personal experience, but hearing from the press. Loss, as in the case of someone, well, there was a lady who lost her husband. He went missing, and she, for about 20-80, this may be a weird case, you would have come across it probably in your studies, but 20-odd years, she went through the process of denying. I said she did not believe the gentleman had died, and she sat the table at every meal and so on and so forth. Well, the great and good news was, one Christmas Eve, the report said that he fell and he hit his head. He had a severe case of amnesia. Oh. And he remembered that he was married and he had a wife, and he looked up and found the address and went back home. So I was just wanting to recognize that some of what you mentioned there tonight in terms of loss occurs sometimes in different situations, not necessarily in terms of death. That's all I wanted to say.
Thanks.
And thanks for acknowledging.
Thanks for that comment. Okay, thank you very much. Oh, there's another. There's a question over there.
At times, you have mentioned before, is the way when we hear of a death, is the way how we project the news to the person. I remember in 2002 when I lost my mother, both parents was very sick. My dad was just recovering from the sickness. He just started walking again. And then there's this young lady just come by. She heard of the news, and none of us, we wanted him to relax a bit, to give him the news, but she just went and tell him, and it was devastating. It's like everybody was so angry with that young lady because my dad couldn't move. He just started walking, and he had just grabbed the door, and it was just shaking. He was just shaking, and we were so angry with that young lady because those things you have to take time to get the person down, as you said, and the person have to be seated, and then you know how to go around because he was very sick. Mm-hmm. So that young lady that day is like we were grieving, but yet still we were angry with that young lady. And I think you're right, is the way how we project the news.
Who
yes,
the message.
And who bring the message.
And so guys, I'm sorry, finish what your statement, I'm sorry.
And then grieving, it's a long process. But at times we'll get there by talking to somebody. Because I remember, it was before I became an Adventist. The death is like I'm the lost child, and we spend a lot of time at home together, doing every sickness. And when I was walking on the road, it's like I was walking in the air. It's like I was so high in the air but it takes time, and I remember I didn't take any of her stuff because I wanted to remember her the way that she was before. So I didn't take anything. Person still have like a tie head or something. I didn't take it. I don't know why, but I don't. And even now, when I went to my older sisters visit them, and they would said, "You remember this?" I can't remember because I don't take anything. I just want to remember the way that she was before. Yes.
Okay, and also to another way that persons don't want to let go is when you have the person's things just remain as is, the room spread as though it would normally be, the clothes hang up, that's not letting go. That's holding on to the person. And so it causes the grief to extend, because the person is no longer there. And you have to come to that point where you accept that the person is no longer part of the living. And so get rid of the clothes, change the room, whatever it is. All right? So
one more point. Yes, I agree with you because I don't believe in keeping all those stuff around. Once the person died, the room and everything, why you have things hung up and everything, I think the more you get rid of it is the more you have closure and all that.
yes,
Because I
closure
remember,
is it, yes.
recently there is a gentleman that was close to us in the country. He died. And he was living in this. And then my niece went there and she burned the stuff because he was living in condition, and she burned the stuff. And it was an argument for the caretakers because I wonder why they want the stuff to be living in the house like that, and that person don't have close relative there. They are the caretakers, but those things, I think that those things not supposed to be remained. Okay. You have to get rid of those stuff.
Yes.
Because that person is no longer there. So the longer you hold on to those things is the longer you grieve.
Okay.
I think so. I don't know what you think.
Yes, it is so. It is so. And remember, guys, whatever your loss is, could be a person or a thing, it is still a loss. All right? So bear that in mind. Some persons don't consider, for example, miscarriage as a loss. It is a loss. If you lost maybe property or something, it's still a loss. You still grieve as well. So be very mindful of what you say to persons, because you can become insensitive. People need to grieve when they are experiencing loss, short term, long term, whatever it is. All right, I think that is it for us tonight. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
We learned so much tonight, and my takeaway is grief is a process. We will all go through grief at some point. We all grieve differently, and most importantly, there is hope in the Lord. What do you say, church? We have hope in Christ. So all is not lost. Let us put our hope and our trust in God. Please join us again tomorrow night as we continue. We'll be online for tomorrow night and Friday night, and we will return here on a Sabbath morning. Tomorrow night we look at single-minded, being single, whole, and living life to the full. Friday night, raising good children, the jewels of the family. And on Sabbath, finding the love of your life. We are blessed. We have been blessed. For Sabbath afternoon, we will be looking at aging like fine wine. So please join us tomorrow night online, Friday night online, and Sabbath here at church. Also, you're missing out because tonight, we are treated by the Family Life Department with soup and crackers. So please stay back, all who are here. Let us all stand for the benediction. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace, this night and forevermore. Amen.